What if the most powerful decision you could make today required no money, no special talent, no perfect circumstances, just the radical, quietly revolutionary choice to stop explaining yourself to people who were never truly listening? There is a war happening inside most people right now. Not the kind with weapons or battlefields. The kind that happens in the space between who you are trying to become and the noise of a world that has a very specific opinion about who you should be. The kind that plays out every time you feel the pull to justify your choices to someone who didn't ask with genuine curiosity. Every time you shrink a little to make someone else comfortable. Every time you pour your attention outward, into arguments you didn't start, into relationships that drain without restoring, into the endless performance of a life lived for other people's approval, while the life you were actually meant to build sits waiting in the quiet. This conversation is about that quiet. About what lives inside it when you finally stop filling it with everything and everyone that doesn't belong there. About the ancient, underestimated, profoundly misunderstood power of a person who has made two decisions that sound simple and cost everything. Stay silent. Focus on yourself. Not as indifference. Not as arrogance. Not as the cold withdrawal of someone who has given up on the world. But as the most deliberate, most disciplined, most deeply loving thing you can do, for yourself, and ultimately, for every person who deserves the best of you. Let's go into this. The world will always have an opinion. Here is the first thing you need to understand about the noise. It never stops on its own. There will never be a morning you wake up to find that the world has run out of opinions about your life. There will never be a season where everyone around you suddenly agrees that you are doing enough, being enough, moving in exactly the right direction at exactly the right speed. The commentary does not pause for your healing. The comparisons do not take a break while you are building. The unsolicited opinions, the subtle criticisms, the well-meaning advice that somehow always manages to make you feel smaller rather than taller, none of it waits for a convenient time. It is constant. And here is what that constant noise does to a person who has not yet learned to protect their inner world from it. It colonizes you. Not all at once. Gradually. The way water finds its way into a structure, through the smallest cracks, the most imperceptible gaps, and then expands, over time, until what was once solid begins to shift. You start making decisions based on what will be easiest to explain. You start editing your dreams down to the size that won't attract too much commentary. You start spending your most valuable resource, your focused attention, on managing other people's perceptions of you rather than actually building the life those perceptions are supposedly about. And somewhere in the middle of all that managing and explaining and shrinking and performing, you lose the thread. The thread that connects you to your own vision. Your own values. Your own quiet, certain, interior knowing of who you are and what you are here to do. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius understood this with the clarity of a man who had more external noise than almost any human being in history. He was Emperor of Rome. Every person around him had an opinion, an agenda, a version of who he should be in service of their needs. And in the middle of all of it, he wrote, in his private journals, words that were never intended to be read by anyone. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He was not writing a motivational poster. He was writing a survival guide. For himself. In the middle of an empire of noise. The question is not whether the noise will come. The question is whether you will let it in. What silence actually is. Most people have a completely wrong understanding of silence. They think silence is absence. Emptiness. The thing that is left when words run out or when someone has nothing to say. They think the silent person is the passive one, the one without opinions, without fire, without the confidence to speak up and take up space. This understanding is not just wrong. It is almost perfectly backwards. Silence, real silence, chosen silence, the silence of a person who has decided with full deliberateness what they will and will not spend their words on, is one of the most active, most powerful, most strategically intelligent postures a human being can adopt. Think about water for a moment. Water does not announce what it is about to do. It does not explain its direction. It does not hold a press conference before it carves a canyon. It simply moves, quietly, consistently, with absolute commitment to its own nature, and over time, it reshapes the hardest stone on earth without ever raising its voice. The person who has mastered silence operates the same way. They are not absent. They are concentrated. They are not passive. They are selective. They are not without opinions. They have simply learned the extraordinary discipline of keeping their most important thoughts, plans, and movements protected from the corrosive exposure of premature sharing. There was a man named Solomon, not the biblical king, but a contemporary architect with an extraordinary gift, who made a decision early in his career that his colleagues found baffling. Every time he was working on something significant, he went completely quiet about it. No updates on social media. No conversations about the project at dinner parties. No sharing of early sketches or half-formed ideas with anyone who asked. His colleagues thought it was arrogance. His friends thought it was secrecy. His family thought he was struggling. He was thriving. Because Solomon had discovered something that years of experience had taught him with absolute certainty: the moment you expose an unfinished thing to outside opinion, you invite those opinions to become part of the architecture. And other people's opinions, however well-intentioned, are built for their lives, not yours. He protected his work in silence until it was strong enough to stand on its own. Until the foundation was so solid that no opinion could touch the structure. And the work he produced, built in that protected, silent, sovereign space, was unlike anything his colleagues, who had been building in the noise all along, ever managed to create. Silence is not the absence of power. Silence is where power is built. The draining cost of constant explanation. Let me ask you something honest. How much of your energy, in any given week, goes toward explaining yourself to people who are not going to understand you anyway? Explaining your choices to family members whose vision for your life has never matched your own. Defending your boundaries to people who experience every limit you set as a personal offense. Justifying your pace, your path, your priorities to a social circle whose approval you have been trained since childhood to seek, even when that approval costs you the very momentum you are trying to build. This is not a small drain. This is not a manageable leak that you can simply factor into the budget of your energy. This is hemorrhaging. Every explanation you give to someone who wasn't genuinely asking costs you something you cannot get back. Not just the time of the conversation itself, but the mental energy spent constructing the explanation, anticipating the response, processing the reaction, recovering from the interaction, and then lying awake at 2 a.m. wondering if you said the right thing and what they think of you now. That is an enormous tax on a resource that is already finite. And here is the part that makes this particular tax so insidious: it is often levied in the name of relationship. In the name of transparency. In the name of being the kind of person who doesn't keep secrets and doesn't disappear and doesn't become so self-focused that the people around you feel shut out. These are real values. Connection matters. Transparency, in the right relationships, is a gift. But there is a profound difference between sharing openly with people who have earned access to your interior world, and explaining yourself endlessly to people who will use the explanation to construct their next argument against your choices. Epictetus, a man who had every reason to spend his life in explanation, in justification, in the desperate performance of worthiness for an audience that held all the external power, refused. He wrote, "Never explain yourself to anyone. The person who likes you doesn't need it. The person who dislikes you won't believe it." Read that again. Slowly. The person who already understands you doesn't need the explanation, they already see you. The person who has decided not to understand you will not be moved by the explanation, they will simply use it as raw material for their next criticism. So who, exactly, are you explaining yourself to? And what, exactly, are you getting in return? What focus on yourself actually demands? Focusing on yourself is not a passive act. It is not lying in a bath with a candle and calling it self-care. It is not a weekend retreat followed by Monday morning back to the same patterns. It is not the occasional hour of journaling sandwiched between 6 hours of other people's emergencies. Focusing on yourself is a full, demanding, daily practice. And it asks more of you than almost anything else, because it asks you to consistently choose your own growth, your own vision, your own becoming, in a world that is constantly presenting you with more immediately urgent reasons to focus somewhere else. There was a woman named Miriam who had spent the better part of a decade being extraordinarily useful to everyone around her. She was the person her friends called in crisis. The person her family leaned on in difficulty. The person her colleagues relied on for the emotional labor that kept the office functional. She was everywhere, present, capable, available, indispensable. And she was disappearing. Not visibly. From the outside, Miriam looked like someone who had it together. But inside, in the private interior of her own life, she had not moved in years. The book she was going to write sat in a folder untouched. The business she had been planning existed only in a notebook with increasingly faded ink. The version of herself she had intended to become was somewhere in the distance, waiting patiently, watching her spend every available unit of energy on everything except the journey toward her. One morning, ordinary morning, nothing special about it, Miriam sat at her kitchen table before anyone else was awake. And she asked herself a question she had been avoiding for years. If I keep living the way I am living right now, where will I be in 10 years? She sat with the answer for a long time. And then she made a decision that felt, at first, almost selfish. Almost wrong. Almost like a betrayal of the person she had spent a decade being. She decided to focus on herself. Not instead of loving the people in her life. Not instead of showing up and being present. But in addition to, and when necessary, before. She carved out the hours. She protected them with the same ferocity she had previously reserved for everyone else's needs. She became, in the eyes of some people around her, less available. And she became, in the only eyes that ultimately matter, herself. The book got written. Not perfectly, not quickly, but consistently, in the protected hours that used to be given away. The business got started. Not explosively, but steadily, in the focused attention that used to be scattered across other people's crises. And Miriam, the actual Miriam, the one who had been waiting in the distance, began, finally, to close the gap. Focusing on yourself is not a luxury. It is the prerequisite for everything you actually want to build. The philosophy of stillness. The ancient Stoics had a practice they called odium, a Latin word that translates roughly as leisure or stillness, but means something far richer than either of those English words captures. Odium was the deliberate cultivation of inner quiet. The intentional withdrawal from the noise of public life in order to do the most important work of all, the work of knowing yourself, developing yourself, returning to the values and vision that external busyness has a way of obscuring. Seneca, who lived one of the most dramatically eventful lives in Roman history, who was advisor to an emperor, who was exiled, recalled, nearly executed, and ultimately forced to take his own life, wrote about odium with a longing and a conviction that tells you everything about how rarely he was able to access it and how completely he believed in its necessity. I am not born for one corner, the whole world is my native land. But he also wrote, in a letter to his friend Lucilius that reads as urgently today as it did 2,000 years ago, that the world would take everything from you if you let it. That the crowd would consume your time, your attention, your interior life, leaving you with the external appearance of a full existence and the internal reality of an empty one. His instruction was not complicated. Recede in te ipsi. Withdraw into yourself. Not forever. Not as abandonment of the world. But as regular, non-negotiable, fiercely protected practice of returning to the center. Of remembering who you are beneath the noise. Of doing the inner work that makes the outer work possible. This is what staying silent and focusing on yourself actually is, at its deepest, most philosophically grounded level. It is not a lifestyle trend. It is not a social media aesthetic of candles and morning routines. It is one of the oldest, most battle-tested, most profoundly human practices of wisdom that exists. And it is available to you. Right now. In the middle of whatever noise currently surrounds your life. We have covered real ground in this first part. We have looked honestly at the noise, what it is, what it does, how it colonizes a life that is left unprotected. We have examined what silence truly means, not as absence but as concentrated, sovereign, deliberate power. We have felt the real cost of constant explanation and recognized, perhaps for the first time with complete clarity, how much of our most valuable energy goes toward justifying ourselves to people who weren't genuinely asking. We have met Miriam, and Solomon, and the version of yourself that has been waiting, patiently, faithfully, without judgment, for you to turn your full attention toward the life you were actually meant to build. And we have grounded all of it in one of the oldest, most proven philosophical traditions in human history. We talk about the specific, practical, daily architecture of a life lived in focused silence. What it looks like to actually protect your peace when the world keeps finding new ways to disturb it. How to handle the people who will resist your stillness. And the profound, life-altering truth about what becomes possible for a person who has finally, turned their most powerful attention toward themselves. Stay with me. The best part is here. There is something that happens to a person when they finally stop running toward the noise. Not immediately. Not on the first day of the decision, or even the first week. But gradually, the way dawn doesn't announce itself but simply becomes undeniable, something begins to shift in the interior of a life that has chosen stillness over performance, focus over distraction, sovereign silence over the exhausting theater of constant explanation. Things become clearer. Not because the external circumstances have changed. Often they haven't changed at all. The same people are still there. The same pressures. The same world with its same relentless appetite for your attention and your energy and your time. But you have changed. Because you have done something that most people spend their entire lives circling without ever quite landing on. You have come home to yourself. And from that place, that quiet, grounded, unhurried place of genuine self-possession, everything looks different. Everything becomes possible in a way it simply wasn't before. Because you are no longer building with what is left over after the noise has taken its share. You are building with everything. Not just understanding the philosophy of focused silence, but actually living it. The specific, practical, daily reality of what it means to protect your peace in a world that is specifically designed to disturb it. Protecting your peace is an active practice. Let's begin with something that needs to be said clearly and without softening. Your peace will not protect itself. This is perhaps the most important and most consistently underestimated truth about the life we are describing. People hear the phrase protect your peace and imagine it as something passive, a state of calm that, once achieved, simply maintains itself. As if peace were a destination you arrive at and then inhabit effortlessly for the rest of your days. It is not a destination. It is a practice. A daily, active, sometimes uncomfortable practice of making choices, small choices and large ones, that consistently prioritize your inner stability over the various forces that would destabilize it if given access. Every morning when you choose silence before reaching for your phone, that is protecting your peace. Every time you decline to engage with a provocation that is designed to pull you off center, that is protecting your peace. Every boundary you hold, every explanation you withhold, every hour you redirect from someone else's agenda toward your own becoming, that is protecting your peace. None of these choices are passive. None of them are easy, especially in the beginning when the old patterns are still loud and the pull of the familiar is strong. All of them require the kind of active, intentional, daily commitment that transforms over time from effortful decision into embodied identity. There was a man named Ezekiel who had spent the majority of his adult life being what he described as available at the cost of everything. Available to take the call at any hour. Available to absorb the emotional weather of every person in his orbit. Available to set aside whatever he was working on the moment someone else's need appeared on the horizon. He wore his availability like a badge, proof of his loyalty, his love, his worth as a friend, a son, a colleague, a human being. But Ezekiel was exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. The exhaustion that comes not from physical depletion but from the continuous, cumulative cost of never being fully present to your own life. One Sunday morning he made a decision that felt, to him, almost radical in its simplicity. He turned his phone off for 4 hours. Not forever. Not as a statement. Just 4 hours on a Sunday morning, given entirely and without apology to himself. He read. He walked. He sat with his own thoughts without immediately offering them to anyone else. He let the silence be what it was, not empty, not uncomfortable, but inhabited. Full of something he had been too busy to notice was missing. Himself. Those 4 hours became 8. 8 became a daily practice. The daily practice became the architecture of a life that, within 18 months, Ezekiel's closest friends described with a word they had never used about him before. Peaceful. Not because his circumstances had dramatically changed, but because he had stopped allowing his circumstances unlimited access to his interior world. Protecting your peace begins with 1 hour. One morning. One small, sovereign decision to treat your inner life as the most important territory you will ever be responsible for. Make that decision today. And then make it again tomorrow. The people who will resist your stillness. There is something you need to be prepared for, because it will come, and if you are not prepared for it, it will feel like confirmation that you are doing something wrong when you are actually doing something exactly right. When you begin to focus on yourself and stay silent, when you start protecting your peace with genuine commitment rather than occasional intention, some people in your life will not like it. They will experience your stillness as withdrawal. Your silence as rejection. Your focus as selfishness. Your peace as a judgment on their chaos. And they will, in various ways and with varying degrees of subtlety, attempt to pull you back. Some will do it with guilt. You've changed. You're not the same person you used to be. You don't have time for anyone anymore. Some will do it with concern dressed as criticism. I'm just worried about you. You've become so isolated. Is everything okay? Some will do it with the most sophisticated tool in the arsenal, making your growth about their feelings. I feel like I'm losing you. I feel like you don't care anymore. I feel like this new version of you has no room for me. And if you are not rooted, if your commitment to your own peace is not yet deep enough to withstand the weight of someone else's discomfort, these attempts will work. You will feel the old guilt rising. The old need to reassure, to explain, to make yourself smaller so that they feel more comfortable. Here is what you need to know in those moments. Other people's discomfort with your growth is not evidence that your growth is wrong. It is often evidence that your growth is working. Because the people who are benefiting from your distraction, your availability, your scattered energy, your willingness to prioritize everyone else's needs over your own, those people experience your focus as a loss. Not because they are necessarily malicious, but because a system that was designed around your unavailability to yourself is naturally disrupted when you become available to yourself. That disruption is not your responsibility to resolve. A woman named Adiz went through exactly this experience when she made the decision to focus on building her business after years of putting it off in favor of being everything to everyone around her. The resistance came from the people she loved most. Her mother called it selfishness. Her closest friend felt abandoned. Her partner, who had grown comfortable with a version of Adiz who was always available, struggled with the boundaries she was beginning to establish around her working hours. The old Adiz would have retreated. Would have apologized. Would have dismantled the very boundaries that were making her productive for the first time in years, in order to make the people around her comfortable. The new Adiz, the one who had finally understood what focused silence was asking of her, held. Not harshly. Not without love. But with the quiet, unshakable certainty of someone who has seen, clearly and completely, what the alternative costs. She held. And over time, not immediately, but inevitably, the people who loved her genuinely adjusted. They found a new relationship with the version of her that was growing. They discovered that the Adese who protected her peace and focused on her becoming was, paradoxically, more present when she was present, more joyful, more grounded, more genuinely available, than the Adese who had been everywhere at once and fully nowhere. You will face resistance. Hold anyway. The compound interest of focused silence. There is a principle in finance that everyone understands intellectually and almost no one applies with enough patience to experience its full power. Compound interest. The idea that small, consistent investments, made regularly and left undisturbed, grow over time in ways that feel almost magical. Not because of any single dramatic deposit, but because of the patient, faithful, mathematically inevitable accumulation of returns on returns on returns. Focused silence works exactly the same way. Every hour you spend in genuine focus, on your craft, your growth, your vision, your becoming, is a deposit. And like a financial deposit left to compound, it does not simply add to what was already there. It multiplies it. The writer who writes every morning for 1 hour, quietly, without announcing it, without performing the process, does not just accumulate words. They accumulate fluency, depth of thought, the ability to access ideas that only reveal themselves to minds that have made a habit of going looking for them. They accumulate a body of work that, one day, will seem to appear from nowhere in the eyes of people who are not watching the daily deposits being made. The entrepreneur who works on their vision in protected silence, who does not scatter their energy across the performance of hustle but instead channels it into the actual building, does not simply accumulate progress. They accumulate momentum. The kind of deep, directional momentum that makes the work feel less like effort and more like inevitability. The person who spends every morning in stillness, who meets themselves in the quiet before the noise begins, does not simply accumulate peace. They accumulate self-knowledge. The kind of intimate, nuanced, unshakable understanding of their own values and patterns and needs that makes them genuinely difficult to manipulate, destabilize, or pull off course. This is what the Stoics meant when they talked about melody, the Greek word for practice or exercise. They understood that virtue, wisdom, courage, justice, self-discipline, was not a gift handed to a lucky few. It was the compound result of daily practice. Small, consistent, unglamorous deposits made with faith in the process even when the results were not yet visible. Seneca wrote to Lucilius, Dum differtur vita transcurrit. While we delay, life passes. Every day you spend waiting for the perfect conditions to focus on yourself, every day you give to the noise because the noise is loud and your own voice feels uncertain in comparison, is a day the compound interest of your becoming does not accumulate. The deposits are small. The practice is quiet. The results take time. But they are as inevitable as mathematics. Start the deposits. Today. In whatever small, protected, genuine way is available to you right now. And trust the compounding. What becomes possible in the silence? I want to tell you what I have observed, in studying the lives of people who have made this choice, who have committed to focused silence and the protection of their inner peace with genuine seriousness, about what becomes possible on the other side. The first thing that becomes possible is clarity. Not the temporary clarity of a good night's sleep or a productive morning. The deep, structural clarity of a mind that is no longer spending its best energy managing noise. When the explanations stop. When the performance of availability stops. When the energy that was going in 17 directions begins to flow in one, something in the mind settles into a quality of thought that most people have never accessed. Problems that seemed insurmountable reveal their solutions. Decisions that felt impossibly complex become obvious. The path forward, which was always there, obscured by the noise, becomes visible. The second thing that becomes possible is creativity. Real creativity, the kind that produces something genuinely original, genuinely valuable, genuinely yours, does not happen in the noise. It happens in the silence between the noise. In the protected hours when the mind is not performing or explaining or reacting but simply being, wandering freely through its own interior landscape, making connections that the busy, reactive, noise-managed mind never has the space to make. Every great work, every piece of art, every business that changed an industry, every idea that moved the world, was born in someone's silence. In the hours they protected from the noise. In the space they refused to fill with anything that didn't belong to their vision. Your greatest work is waiting in your silence. Go find it. The third thing that becomes possible is genuine relationship. This one surprises people. They assume that focusing on yourself and protecting your peace means becoming less available to the people you love, and therefore having shallower, more distant relationships. The opposite is true. When you are scattered, when your energy is depleted by the noise, your attention divided across 100 demands, your inner world colonized by everyone else's needs, you are not actually present to the people who matter. You are physically there but energetically absent. You are going through the motions of connection without the substance of it. But when you are focused, when you have protected your inner life and returned to yourself and built from that grounded center, you bring something entirely different to your relationships. You bring presence. Real, unhurried, fully inhabited presence. The kind that makes people feel genuinely seen and genuinely met. The kind that is only available from a person who is fully available to themselves. Focusing on yourself does not diminish your relationships. It makes you worth being in relationship with. The well. There is an image I want to leave with you. In a small village, there was a woman who was known for one thing above all others. She gave water. Every person in the village knew that if they were thirsty, if they needed water, they could come to her and she would give it freely, generously, without question. She was beloved for this. Celebrated for this. Her identity was built around this single act of giving. But the woman had a well. And she had forgotten to tend it. She gave so freely, so constantly, so completely focused on the needs of everyone who came to her, that she never stopped to check the level of the well itself. Never stopped to protect it, to allow it to replenish, to ensure that what she was drawing from had a source that was being honored. One morning the village came to her, as it always did, thirsty and in need. And the bucket came up empty. Not because she had stopped caring. Not because she had become selfish. But because she had given from the well without ever tending to what filled it. She spent the next season doing something that felt, at first, completely counterintuitive. She closed access to the well. She focused on the source. She cleared the channels that had become blocked. She allowed the water table to rise again, slowly, quietly, in the protected space of a well that was no longer being depleted faster than it could replenish. And when she reopened access, when she returned to giving, the water that came up was cleaner, more abundant, more sustaining than anything she had offered before. You are the well. Your peace, your focus, your inner life, these are not luxuries you can afford to neglect in the service of constant giving. They are the source. Tend them. Protect them. And watch what becomes possible when you give from a place of abundance rather than depletion. The decision that changes everything. We are coming to the end of this conversation. And I want to close with something that is less like advice and more like a mirror. Because everything we have discussed today, the power of silence, the necessity of focus, the active daily practice of protecting your peace, the compound interest of consistent quiet investment, the profound creativity and clarity and genuine relationship that become possible when you stop giving the noise unlimited access to your interior world. All of it rests on a single decision. Not a complicated decision. Not one that requires perfect conditions or ideal circumstances or the approval of anyone around you. Just a decision. The decision to treat your inner life as the most important territory you will ever be responsible for. The decision to stop explaining yourself to people whose understanding you do not actually need. The decision to redirect, gradually, consistently, without drama, the energy that has been going outward toward everything that doesn't serve your becoming, and channel it inward, toward the life that has been waiting for you to arrive. But because you matter. Your growth matters. Your peace matters. Your vision for your life matters. The version of yourself that is waiting on the other side of this decision, quieter, clearer, more focused, more genuinely powerful than the version that has been performing availability for an audience that never deserved front row seats. That version of you matters more than the noise that has been drowning them out. Make the decision. Stay silent. Focus on yourself. And let the life you have been delaying finally understood. Every week we come here and we have the conversations that go beneath the surface. The honest conversations. The ones that don't just make you feel good for a moment but genuinely shift something in how you see yourself and how you choose to live. If that is what you are hungry for, and staying until the very end of this video tells me that it is, then subscribe to the Stoic Path right now. Hit that button. Turn on your notifications. Because there is so much more of this waiting for you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is giving too much to the noise and not enough to themselves. Someone who has been explaining themselves to people who were never truly listening. Someone who is ready, even if they don't know it yet, to come home to themselves. Send it to them. They will know why. This is the Stoic Path. And the quieter, clearer, more focused and more powerfully alive version of you is closer than you think. Go find.